The danger with AI is that the Australian voice is going to disappear. You know, you have a different voice, you have a different perspective on the world, and you have a region where you want to ensure that your soft power is also available to media in the Pacific and Southeast Asia as well.
One for mum, one for dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. The Treasurer knows.
I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day, and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains economics, politics and policy in plain English. I'm Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Australia Institute. Australia's traditional media landscape is, let's face it, pretty cooked. Declining readership, broken business models, and owners that seem more interested in influencing public opinion than reporting the news. And now it's facing a new threat, artificial intelligence.
You know, I think AI will probably, most likely sort of lead to the end of the world, but in the meantime, there will be great companies created with serious machine learning.
Mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. Far.
From everything you know, everything you understand, is generative AI potentially an existential threat to the human species?
I think that's what I've been saying, yes. It really is an existential threat.
So will this mean the death of traditional media as we know it? This week, we're joined by two top industry experts to explore the threats and opportunities of AI. Clive Marshall is the former CEO at the UK Press Association, and Emma Cowdroy is Acting Chief Executive Officer at the Australian Associated Press. They joined Australia Institute Executive Director Richard Dennis live in our studio to discuss how AI is already being used by media organisations, what its use means for trust, and how governments can support sustainable public interest journalism. We started by asking Clive exactly what a newswire service is and why it matters for the entire journalistic ecosystem. I hope you enjoy.
So a news agency and the news agency wire service is normally the heart of the news ecosystem in virtually every country in the world. And the news wire is a wholesale service provided by the news agency that provides the building blocks for the news media, whether that's broadcasters, radio, newspapers, primarily in the old days, digital platforms that can take elements from the news agency and then add their own input to create the products that their readers, their listeners, their viewers are looking for. And most news wires and most news agencies are focused on the domestic, their own country content, but there would be some big global news agencies like Reuters, like Associated Press, like Agence France-Presse as well.
Emma, just on that, so to make that really clear for Australians, so in Australia, AAP would go to press conferences, cover what the Prime Minister said, cover what, happened in a court case, and then just make that available to any newspaper, big or small, in Australia or around the world.
Yes, that's correct, as long as they're subscribers to the service. And then certainly in the past, that was pretty much the entire media in Australia would have taken it. And the reason that model works, why a wholesale model works, is because it's a pooled service. And so there are efficiencies for all media, and also regional, remote and regional papers can get access to a service that they would just not be able to send their own reporters to. And it works because there's an economy in that.
Yeah.
And then obviously, I jumping in, but we do still supply to most media in Australia, just not News Corp.
Yeah. So we'll come to News Corp in a minute, but obviously the media is under pressure in Australia and around the world. Less and less people are subscribing, to newspapers. The classified advertising's dried up. So that means their revenues are declining. Does that mean they've been increasingly relying on, because we're going to talk about AI in a minute, but before there was AI, there was a wire service. As their revenues were drying up around the world, Clive, have news wires sort of blossomed, or are they struggling too?
So I think the use of the newswire is blossoming. I think the ability of the newswire customers to pay more for those services is declining. So you've got this, this real dichotomy between greater demand for content and a lower ability to pay for that content.
Yeah. So more desperate customers for the content, but more desperate customers in terms of the revenue.
Yeah.
Is that the Australian experience?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I've often said, and it sounds trite, but it is true, that when our customers sneeze, we catch the cold. And that has certainly been AAP's experience.
Okay, so there's another way that newspapers can save money, and that is they can go with AI. So, obviously what we want to talk a bit about today is the consequences of that. Yeah. And we can come back to how AI and newswires interact. But I don't know if most people watching today have thought too hard about what's happening around the world with newspapers and how are they using AI today?
So I think today, and I think the take-up is different in different marketplaces, and part of that will be driven by the pressures the media are under in those markets. But most of the focus around AI for the news media will be around products and process. And I think most have probably started off with process because it's easier. They've got their processes. They know where those processes are.
What do you mean? Imagine I didn't work at a newspaper. What process?
Yeah, so processes could be applying metadata to content that makes it easy to be searchable.
Yeah.
It could be using AI to identify people in pictures. So you take a photograph of the Prime Minister with somebody, but there could be 6 other people in the picture. Nobody at the time would have captured those people, but maybe later those people are in the news and you need to know you've got a photograph of those people.
And AI might be used.
AI could do that in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe accurately. I just mean there's been some instances recently with journalists putting the wrong names under people, and now I'm wondering.
And that was a problem even before AI.
Of course.
The key is you've got to have professional people and human intervention to check it.
Yeah. Emma, what have you seen in Australia with use of AI in the Australian media?
So I think we would see AI, or certainly I can speak for AAP's use of it. It's primarily as an enhancement rather than as a replacement. And that's certainly been our approach to it. So there is human touch right throughout. I think probably we are a low adopter because we still do primary source journalism. And primary source journalism is what other people might know as shoe leather journalism. And that is not easily, that is not able to be replaced by AI from our perspective.
So I don't know if this is common in Australia or not, but I've read that News Corp papers are using AI to help kind of generate story ideas and possibly even to teach people how to write in other people's voices. Is that something you're aware of?
I mean, I am sure. I'm not familiar with what's happening at News Corp, but I think the power and the ability of AI to assist, provided it's got the right guardrails and you're applying that, could be anything from. I remember when I was running PA, Man United football team in the UK had a terrible start to the season. The newsroom, the sports journalists had written many stories about why Man United had started so badly. And I remember the editor saying to me that they'd gone onto one of the platforms and they said, what could we look at about why it's been such a lousy start to the season? And he was a skeptic and he said, it's amazing. 6 of the ideas we'd already run, but there were 2 we had never thought of. So then they're applying their journalistic skills and then that's to the benefit of the newsroom, benefit of the audience for that content as well.
So that's already happening.
I think getting ideas for headlines, if you can certainly see plenty of commentary about how newsrooms are using AI to give them suggestions that they would then adapt in their own style. So it's another resource, but just like Google search was a resource before that. And I've been in the industry long enough to remember all the paper archives where you'd go down the basement to get all the paper clippings. It's a resource you've got to be cautious and you've got to apply your skills to them. It's just the speed is so much quicker now that, a paper archive, you could make a mistake and spot it and correct it. Now it's in an instance, isn't it?
So, Emma, you were saying before that, if your customers sneeze, you catch a cold. I assume in Australia, most of your customers, the AAP customers, are the smaller regional outlets, and I presume they're less well placed to use AI in these positive ways that Clive's talking about. Is that what you observe?
I would say that is probably correct. I think that the flip side to what Clive's talking about, which is the process the enhancement concept is the product concept. And I think the problem, for newsrooms in regional Australia, and they will not have the ability the power to be able to negotiate with the platforms to be able to get appropriate compensation for the use of their content. So without that money coming in to replace the money that's going to be lost, they'll have less money to be able to invest to be able to look at whether they can enhance their processes.
Yeah, and I guess one of the big things with AI, and I must admit I'm a user of technology, and Google was AI before it was called AI.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-tech, but I must admit I think we overuse the term intelligence when we're talking about AI. I think we think the computer's going to give us all the great ideas, but leaving that aside, Emma, at the moment go back one step. AI is only as good as what it's trained on. Yeah. And if it's garbage in, garbage out.
Sure.
If AI is reading nonsensical stuff on social media and then turning nonsensical social media into a summary of what the people are thinking, that's quite different from if AI is trained on the internal documents of an organization like law firms do, or I presume, historic AAP content. Like what's the role for something like AAP, or indeed other media outlets, for kind of training AI well?
Yeah, well, I think that's a big question, and the reason it's a big question is because yes, you want. If AI, and it is here to stay, and it's going to overtake all of us very, very quickly. If it's here to stay, you want it to be trained on a range of voices, because if it's not trained on a range of voices, you're going to end up with the loudest voice in the market becoming the dominant theme of the information that it surfaces. And so, but the problem, of course, if it's been trained on a range of voices, you want those people like us to be compensated for it. And it's incredibly difficult to get that compensation. And we've been trying. We've used some international consultants to try and help us, and we've only been successful in one arrangement.
Artificial intelligence is a game changer for our economy.
Australia's copyright laws are out of sync with the rest of the world. So this is a barrier to AI companies who want to train or host their models in Australia.
But in order to realise the dividends that the Productivity Commission is talking about, can we only do that if we trade away copyright and privacy protections?
Definitely not.
The government needs to put guardrails in place.
This is one of the problems we have in this country. Every time something happens, people say we should have more laws. I mean, more laws is not the answer.
We can chart a middle course that makes our workers and our people and our industries beneficiaries, not victims of technological change.
So how would that, obviously this came up at the Productivity Commission roundtable recently. Australian writers, I don't know if you were in Australia for this, Clive, but
I saw
yeah, Australian writers were urged, just give it all away for free. Why not donate your intellectual property to tech moguls? It'll help the country. I mean, the idea that anyone would go along with that, I thought was bonkers. But you're saying, Emma, it's hard to get people to pay. Is there a market for high quality stuff to train AI on, or do they want it for free?
I think that horse is already bolted, isn't it? Because the AI platforms, basically, I use my words, would be they basically help themselves to everything. They stole it all. So it's all sitting there in their large language models. I think some of them that have obviously got an awful lot of capital are starting to set up arrangements where they're paying for some of the content, like News Corp, like the Financial Times.
Who's paying who there? That's
so the large language models are actually buying a license, but that's probably for the ongoing.
That's it's usually the live feed.
Yeah, the live feed, and
so they've stolen it all in the past, but they're paying for the update.
For the updates, because that's where the value is, isn't it? Because otherwise they're locked in time. So I think. I wonder whether what we're seeing at the moment is what we saw with the news when Google and the others helped themselves to all the news services all those years ago and never paid anybody. And then slowly some of them started to pay a little bit, didn't they, to legalize what they were doing. And I think we're starting to see that with AI, but we'll only see it with the good, well-funded AI platforms that are that way inclined. And what really worries me in Australia would be, that's fine. So News Corp can negotiate, Nine Fairfax can negotiate. But if you're a small regional newspaper and they've helped themselves to your content and they're helping themselves to your live stories, and if you go on ChatGPT today, OpenAI, and say, are AI platforms going behind the paywall and helping themselves to content? They say yes. Which is quite amazing. So these small regional media groups, whether it's radio, TV, digital, are not going to get recompensed, and they have no muscle to negotiate with these people. Whether the government can step in and do that for them,
Yeah. So let me, back up, because a lot of people won't probably, when they're reading the newspaper, think, how much of this came from a newswire service? That's Australian consumers of the media. Probably they might see AAP, or they might see AFP down there. So let's just back up. I'm reading my local newspaper. It's going to have content in there, likely from an Australian wire service, or an international wire service. In that sense, you're using the term before, it's a wholesaler. It's going to the press conference once, it's going to the court case once, it's writing the facts of the story once, and then people can either take that as you wrote it, or they can add on top of that. So if that's the wholesale service, it seems like a pretty important service. As an economist, I'd say it's, essential infrastructure that other news is built on top of. But Emma, this is a bit of a Dorothy Dixer, I suppose, but I don't actually know the answer. So if your customers can't afford to pay and the AI companies won't pay, how do we actually keep this essential bit of democratic infrastructure going? What's your plan?
Well, that has been the challenge for AAP for the last 5 years. Obviously, we were owned by News and Nine primarily, with some smaller shareholdings from West Australian News and ACM. We were nearly closed. We were saved into a new model, not-for-profit charity. You've seen that we've had government funding, and I think that primary source journalism, which is that's what we do. Shoe leather journalism, primary source journalism, factual, accurate, independent reporting, which allows others, it's the building blocks of the ecosystem, it allows others to put their opinion and their perspective and to do other stories. There needs to be government funding for that. So there is a public benefit, and we are a public service in part. And I think that if you look at newswires around the globe, that would be the case in the vast majority of countries. And the reason for that is that if you look at newswires globally, there's probably only, and Clive will correct me on this because I think there is 8 commercially viable newswires that essentially where they have enough diversification of their business models to be able to underpin the costs of running a newswire. Because I would be very surprised if there is a newswire, if you extrapolated out all the diversified businesses, that could wash its face. I don't think that exists. But they are in markets that are far less concentrated than Australia, and and those organisations have access to capital and can diversify. So in smaller countries, the government, and not even such small countries actually, France, Agence France Presse receives 130 odd million in funding from the French government because they see that as a vital service and a conduit of information, cultural information and other information about France. And they were, there is a concern that if they don't have that, if that evaporates from the ecosystem, that it's going to have a very detrimental effect on that democracy.
So, Clive, I'll ask you what else is happening internationally. But again, just to clarify, because I just don't think most people think about this, and I think a lot of people watching will think, yeah, okay, I know the Australian media is in trouble. It might, you can understand why people think government's got a role. The ABC, the SBS is part of that. But really what you're saying is when governments support a newswire service, they're actually supporting all the other news agencies, all the other mastheads that rely on that. So it's a kind of cheap way to help them all without having the, I don't think it's a problem, but without actually the government then controlling what the news editorial line at the ABC is.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely critical. And in a democracy like Australia, you must be able to put the guardrails in place to ensure, as you already have with government funding, that they don't interfere with the editorial process. That wouldn't be the case in other parts of the world like China or Russia, where they would fund the news agency and they would expect it to march to its tune. So I think that's the critical thing.
Yeah.
I think the other important thing, having run AAP for 10 years, is it's the Australian voice. You have a different voice, you have a different perspective on the world, and you have a region where you want to ensure that your soft power is also available to media in the Pacific and Southeast Asia as well. And I think the danger with AI is that the Australian voice is going to disappear, because it's very, very clear that the large language training was done primarily on American English content, some UK content, and recently, when I've done some searches on some of these platforms, it comes back and says we don't have that answer because we've trained ourselves on Anglo-Saxon and American data.
The AI says that,
and it says that, because I asked it about females running news agencies in the light of Emma's appointment, and they missed 5 or 6. I said, well, what happened to the Albanian lady and what happened to the Norwegian lady? Yeah, but we're not trained on the data that has that content in it, and that's very difficult, So I think there is a role for government, and I think in the current economic environment, it's hard to imagine. I think it's fine in the UK, where you've got a very, very large news media news media ecosystem, highly competitive, big marketplace, and the agency's got access to capital. They can find their way forward. The Germans would be the same, but in a highly concentrated media marketplace like Australia, how could AAP diversify? It's impossible, and they're capital constrained as well.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the decline of commercial opportunities, as we've said before, customers sneeze, we catch the cold. Philanthropy has filled the gap to a level, but it's not able to fill it to the level that is required. And I think even News Corp have publicly said that it is appropriate that AAP is funded from public money.
I think that's a key point, because someone's got to pay for this, and keep coming back to the obvious. The newspapers say they're not in a position to. The AI companies say they won't. We've talked about the government funding, but in Europe, I suspect not in the US, but is anyone around the world kind of taking this more seriously, saying to the AI companies, come on, you trained it on all this, you admit you trained it on all of this. Do we just have to accept that because they got away with a past theft, it's theirs forever?
Well, I think they're quite clever, to be honest, because I think they're clever enough to drag this through court cases in the hope that by the time they come out, that it's going to take so long to get the compensation that in the meantime, either their models will have moved on or the people suing them will have collapsed. Really, I think that's been the strategy. And if you look at Perplexity's announcement, it is to great hoo-ha. There was an announcement of $42.6 million of a fund of revenue sharing on their product for the media. That is a ridiculously small amount across all the global media to share in a fund that's 42 or whatever it was. It was a very, US dollars. You think about what it costs. We know that there are hidden costs to the creation of journalism that no one would be aware of. And it is an expensive business, and it's expensive because you've got to get it right. And if you get it wrong, it has a whole series of consequences, including, an erosion of trust in the media. So,
and overnight, Financial Times have announced that they are suing Perplexity. And we haven't talked about Images, but Getty Images at the very outset took out a case against Stable Diffusion as well. So there are these court cases going on. But I think the bigger issue in the background is the current government in the US is putting enormous pressure on Western democracies not to bring in digital tax and not to stop their large platforms from training their models.
President Donald Trump has said that the US is immediately ending trade talks with Canada, and that is in response to the country's digital services tax.
President Trump is threatening substantial new tariffs and export restrictions
in retaliation against other nations' digital services taxes.
He says if these taxes and rules are not removed, the U.S. will impose new tariffs and block chip exports.
Bloomberg reporting has found that Mark Zuckerberg was lobbying President Trump on digital taxes before he launched another tariff threat. What can you tell us about that? Who knew that lobbying works?
I'm sure the Australian government would deny that they're being affected by it. The British government are denying, but their very behaviour would suggest in the UK that they are being affected by these pressures because they're just kicking the can down the road. And I think it's probably too late. The training has been done.
Well, I don't know that people who've been charged with historic theft will be able to get away with this argument, but I certainly, no, I mean that. Like, it seems that we're in this remarkable situation of people, I'm sure I took it, but what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
But I guess that the challenge for us in a democracy is that, as you say, Emma, that the shoe leather cost, of reporting the facts really is expensive. So I guess, again, on that, I don't think people think too hard about this, but AI can't go to a press conference and ask a question. AI can't sit in the back of a court and describe what's happening. AI can't show up on the scene of any form of tragedy and describe what's happening. So what's happening to media around the world if they're spending less and less time on those facts? What do you think the costs to our democracy of not covering events anymore is?
Well, I think there is going to be a huge cost to our democracy, and I think it's going to accelerate on us at a pace that none of us could foresee. And I think journalism is actually in peril, and it's not going to be. I mean, Clive and I were both at a meeting recently by someone who has a lot of experience in AI, and we were told, and we've been told subsequent to this, that this was an underestimation of the power of AI, that in 2 years' time it's going to be 10 times better, which means in 4 years' time it's going to be 100 times better. So 100 times better at doing what it is doing now. So the disruption to some industries will use it and it will be highly beneficial to them. But for journalism, I think it's going to be highly corrosive. And I think in that context, the impacts on democracy are going to be significant because there is a possibility that it's going to be the company with the biggest pockets left standing. And it certainly would be the case if there was no viable wholesaler in the market, that is going to be fully exacerbated. And I don't think this is a dystopian universe, years away. I think this is on our doorstep.
Clive, what do you reckon?
I think it's AI is moving so quickly. You talk to what Emma just said about the speed of its improvement, that we're going to need 2 or 3 years, maybe 5 years, to get the whole thing to settle down and really understand. And I think there's massive challenges. We talked about a lot of them today. I think there's also great opportunities as well. And I think as every bit of new technologies come through, we've got to keep our minds open about how do we exploit it for the good, for our industry, make sure that all of the guardrails, as you would call them, are in place, so that people can trust the content, that in the process we don't destroy the public's trust in our news and information services. And capitalize. You talked about press conferences. Some press conferences are being recorded, available on video. And AI is very good at turning a voice into text.
Yes, but who asks the question?
Yeah,
but then the question has to come from, then the journalists have got to be there to do that.
Yeah.
And
it's the primary source. You've got to have primary source journalism. And I think actually in an AI world, the commodity is going to become trust. So that's what has to be recognised in that ecosystem. Because if you don't have information that people can trust, you'll turn away from AI platforms, but it will be too late.
Well, I guess that's where I'm heading. Like, I don't know much about this in the day-to-day sense, but again, AI can only analyze the information that's in front of it.
Yeah, it's just pattern matching.
It's just pattern matching, right? That's fine and that's useful, and yes, it can transcribe this.
Yeah.
And to be clear, at the Institute, we use online transcription services, which I'm sure are powered by AI.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not anti-tech, but again, a human actually still has to go and ask a question.
Yeah, they do.
And unless we're at the stage where the robots are asking the Prime Minister questions at press conferences, I guess where I'm heading, Emma, is this actually feels like it's potentially a big opportunity for newswires because no one else is going to want to do the work, the shoe leather work of being there, reporting what happened, take the photo. Like the AI might be able to tell you who's in the photo, but again, I'm guessing that if there's a car crash or an earthquake, a human actually has to show up. So what are you complaining about? This should be a great opportunity.
Well, someone's got to fund it though, Richard.
Okay.
The issue. Who is funding it? And if you can't drag the AI companies to the table and your customers are being cannibalized, their businesses are being cannibalized by the AI platforms, then someone has to fund it. And I think in a market like Australia, it will require intervention from the government.
And they've done that so far, and I think that's been fantastic. In a country like Australia, to the governments, and it was a different government, was it, recognised that this funding is needed to be put in place. It's been put in place, but
Right. Well, I'm in the sort of position of host today, but I am an economist, so let's think online here. How much a year is the government giving you at the moment?
So they've announced
ballpark.
They've announced 11 million a year for 3 years.
Okay. So what an economist would call that is rounding error.
Yeah.
Right. No, this is the reality is the Australian government spent $700 billion last year.
Yeah.
$700 billion. 11 million is so few decimal places it just wouldn't make it into the budget. So what you're saying is that if the federal government puts significant money into something like a wire service, that every other newspaper in the country is supported by that. The politicians themselves get their press conferences covered. The courts are happy. The sport gets covered. I hadn't thought of sport, but I'm thinking the AI can't go watch the sport either or take the photo. So, I mean, this seems like a huge opportunity. A little bit of money from the government provides not just a service that's already important, but in a world where AI is desperate to have something to evaluate, surely this is the sweet spot for Wire.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think on the basis that all the stories are credited to AAP. So if somebody finds the story on AI, they can see the AAP logo, they can see the source.
But it also becomes, in a model or in a scenario where you are properly resourcing the national newswire, you are providing a natural antidote to mis and disinformation because you are flooding the market with factual, trusted, accurate content.
And that's where we'll leave Richard, Clive and Emma. If you want to join our webinars live, you can subscribe to our newsletter. Find it at australiainstitute.org.au or follow the link in the show notes. The second edition of our Vantage Point series is out now. Dead Centre, How Political Pragmatism is Killing Us by Richard Dennis is available for just $19.95 or become a subscriber for the series and save $15 a year. You can find out more at our website, australiainstitute.org.au. This episode was recorded on Wednesday, the 27th of August, and our theme music is by Jonathan McPeak from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Ebony Bennett. Thanks for listening.